house behind me is called Trotts Hall, and it's in the village of Milstead, but it wasn't always. Until 1975, it was here in Sittingbourne, in Bell Road, and number 14 in fact.
In 2013, the museum published a book on local historic buildings, and in it, John Clancy contributed a chapter on this house. Trotts Hall was built in around 1741. At first, it was a farmhouse, not much more than a two-up, two-down cottage attached to a much older cottage. But it had a Georgian front on it on the south side, and other cottages were incorporated into the building as time went by. This is the older cottage next door, and you can see part of Trotts Hall on the left. Writing in our book On the High Street, Volume 1, Michael Peters wonders why this lovely old building was seemingly swept away without a thought. By 1791, Trotts Hall was in the possession of Mrs. Mary Trott. The estate consisted of 61 acres of arable land with orchards, barns and yards and so on. The house, with outbuildings, yard and a garden to the south, was an area of around 1 acre. In 1840 it was listed as being owned by W. Kennett but farmed by Edward Twopenny of Woodstock. By 1851 Bell Lane Farm, as it was known, was run by Thomas Reason, who had 985 acres. Its later rather grand appearance is matched by the name Trotts Hall on maps from about the 1860s. By this time it must have had a grand interior too, with ornate wood panelling, fireplace surrounds, staircases and so on. After Thomas Reason died in 1875, this became the home of Henry Payne. He lived here with his wife, daughters and 2 servants. He was the manager of Martin's Bank in the High Street and a magistrate. He was also chairman of the local council and a county councillor for 15 years. He retired in 1927 and died a widower in 1930. At that time the farm and the house were sold, and houses were built on the old orchard to the south of the house.
This small estate was named Trotts Hall Gardens, and it's still here today.
It seems that Henry Payne was the last private resident at this location because by 1934 it was in commercial use. Sittingbourne's relay service had a relay station there. The house was listed as Grade 2 by English Heritage in 1951. Radio Rentals were using it as a maintenance depot in the early 1970s. Rex Boucher was the owner of Holbord's department store and managing director of several other companies in Sittingbourne. When the land behind Holbord's, including Trotts Hall, came up for sale, he bought it. A new supermarket and shopping centre was built first on the land, and Sainsbury's moved in. Rex Boucher wanted Trotts Hall out of the way of the development, but to save this listed building with its fine interiors, he resolved to move it to Milstead and rebuild it in the grounds of his home at Milstead Manor. The architect for the rebuilding was Ross Britton, and Sittingbourne builder Hedley Butcher was tasked with undertaking the project. This was painstaking work, with items numbered for removal or remade if they were beyond saving. Trotts Hall had kept its adjoining garden until now, but when the house was moved, the Bell Centre and an office block, Bell House, were built on the former garden area. After 20 years, in 1996, Sainsbury's moved from here to their current site on the old football ground off Remembrance Avenue, and after a time the Bell Centre became empty. The old supermarket building and Bell Centre were eventually demolished in 2011.
Bell House remains for the moment, and we don't know what is next for this land.
But Trotts Hall's unusual removal to Milstead probably saved it, and it has certainly made a larger and more impressive looking home there, with good quality interiors too.
Looking at Trotts Hall today, as John Clancy remarked, it's difficult to believe that it hasn't been standing here since the 18th century. It's a fitting tribute to both the builder and the architect.
Most of this information can be found in old copies of the East Kent Gazette or in these two books published by the museum. If you have found this video interesting, please subscribe to our YouTube channel or visit our website.